Hi friends, I'm Jen. Welcome to my channel. This is my November reading wrap up. I feel like the lighting is a little weird, but that's because I really wanted to put the Christmas tree in the shot, but behind the Christmas tree is a window, so we're just gonna go with it. I really wanted this background. I really wanted my dragon skull with the Santa Claus hat on. So this is going to just be a very laid back November wrap up video. I actually don't even have any of the books physically with me right now, so I'll just be putting pictures up on the side. I'm decorating for Christmas. My house is a disaster. I don't even have matching pants on right now. Isn't that how the end of the year usually goes? November was a very good reading month for me. I made it a goal to read as many books to continue series as I could, and I think I did a pretty good job. I read 7 books total. 1 was on audio, 1 was on Kindle, and the rest of them were physical, and my average star rating was 4.13. I think that's the highest monthly average star rating I've had all year. So I'm going to talk about these books in no order at all. Whatever comes up first on my notes, that's the one I'm going to talk about. First up is Reckless by Lauren Roberts. This is the second book in the Powerful trilogy. Book 3 comes out in April of next year. I rated the first book in the series a 5-star. This trilogy also includes a novella called Powerful, but I have not read that one yet. This is a YA romantasy, and it's not usually my go-to type of genre. I am starting to move away from YA just in general. But I had heard so many good things about this book that I had to pick it up, and I'm very glad that I did. So I did give the first book 5 stars, and I rated the second book slightly lower. I think I gave it a 4, maybe a 4.5. It did have second book syndrome, in my opinion. In this book, I felt like there were a lot of the same things happening over and over and over again. And also the setting I didn't like. It was in a very dry, sandy, desert, hot setting the entire book, except for a little bit at the end. And that's just not a kind of setting that I want to be in for an entire book. I tend to dislike books that are set in the desert in general, which is also weird because Aladdin is one of my favorite Disney movies. Go figure. Compared to book 1, it just seemed like there were a lot less actual events that were happening. And I didn't get the same warm and fuzzy feelings about Pei and Kai that I did in the first book. That being said, I did not see the ending coming at all. If this book did anything right, it was to make me excited about the third book. I think that the third book is going to hit it out of the park and it's going to be phenomenal. I'm pretty annoyed that I have to wait for Fearless to come out in April of next year. Next book up is Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This was a reread for me. I don't normally reread books, but this series is one of my favorite books. It is also one of my boyfriend's favorite series and some of my children. Out of all of the books I've ever recommended to anybody ever in my life, this book I can recommend to middle schoolers all the way up through adults. And I have. And everybody that has read this book on my recommendation has come back to me and said that they absolutely loved it. From time to time, I will have a student, I teach middle school, who just does not like reading. Actually, that happens a lot. But from time to time, I'll have a student that comes to me and says, I need a book that I want to read. I need a book that is going to make me want to read it. I always give them Scythe. They always, always love it. The first time I read this trilogy, I was in the middle of moving and I loved it so much that I read through it super fast, but I also had a lot of other stuff just going on in life in general. And I forgot most of what happens in this series. So I figured if I'm going to be recommending this to so many people, I need to really know what it's about. It was also the pick for November in my Discord. Basically, this is a dystopian novel where technology has advanced so far that we have eradicated anything negative, disease, hunger, even death. But to control the population, they have these people who are appointed as scythes, and it is their job to what they call glean or kill to keep the population under control. And in the first book, we follow Citra and Rowan, and they are 2 teenagers who are chosen to be apprenticed to become scythes. And this book is phenomenal. The series continues in a way that you wouldn't expect. It's very dystopian. It's very sci-fi. It is also very good. It was a 5-star on my reread. I will be finishing the series in 2025. There is also a fourth book called Gleanings, which is stories from this universe. I have not read that one yet. And it has also been picked up for a movie or a TV show or something like that, but who knows when that will happen. The next one I read was Across the Green Grass Fields by Seanan McGuire. This is book 6 in the Wayward Children series. The series as a whole is about this woman who has a school specifically for children who have found doorways into other worlds. And they have lived in these other worlds and been comfortable and thrived in these other worlds. And for some reason, they had to come back to reality. And they're having a really hard time coping with it. So they can attend this school where other children know exactly what they're going through. And some of the books focus on the school, and then some of the books focus on certain children and their experiences when they went beyond the door. In this book, we follow a girl named Reagan, and her door took her to the Hooflands. This is just fine for her because on Earth, in reality, she loves horses. Right before she finds this door, she found out a secret about herself from her parents that make her feel very ostracized from all of the other children at her school. And in the Hooflands, there are unicorns and centaurs and kelpies, and she just gets to spend the day herding in the fields with these centaurs. Eventually, she has to go and see the queen because these creatures feel like anytime a human comes into their world, it means that something bad is about to happen, and the rule is that they need to go see the queen. This was not my favorite book in the series, but it definitely was not my least favorite. I enjoyed it. It's a short read. All of them are under 200 pages, and I can't wait to continue the series. One of the books that I was most looking forward to reading this year, and I can't believe that it took me all the way until November to read it, was Apprentice to the Villain. Last year, Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer was my favorite book of 2023, so I had high expectations going into Apprentice to the Villain. I like to say that this book series is a mix between The Office and Shrek. It reads like a YA, but it is categorized as a romantasy. The tension, the sexual tension, is very thick. The spice is very, very low. In book 1, it was super, super slow burn. In book 2, that continues. Maybe a little less slow, but it's still slow. In fact, the slow burn is a pretty big part of the plot. That's both good and bad in my opinion. I really like slow burn, but sometimes it's just a little bit too slow. The problem I have with this book is how much it reminds me of a cartoon. When I was growing up, there was a cartoon called Rocky and Bullwinkle, and there was a sub-cartoon within that series that was called Fractured Fairy Tales, and that is what this book series reminds me of. It does give the book that cozy, warm feeling, but in my opinion, it also makes the romance portion of it a little unbelievable because while I want these characters to get together and I want to root for them, in my mind, I'm picturing a cartoon, and to me, that just makes the slow burn a little less hot. It doesn't make me ache for them to get together because, again, it's very hard to not picture them as cartoons in my head. One of my favorite characters from the first book was Kingsley. He's a frog, and we actually do find out a little bit of his backstory, which I found very interesting. I rated this, I believe, just below a 5-star. Mostly because I just can't get this cartoon image out of my head. The next book I read on my Kindle, it is The Fate of the Tierling by Erica Johansson. This is the 3rd book in the Queen of the Tierling series. This is another reread for me. The Queen of the Tierling was one of the first books that we chose to read in my Discord. And because I had read the series before, I did not prioritize it like I should have. So it took me an awful long time to get to book 3. And then when I got to book 3, it took me a long time to get through it. I would just read a chapter here or there. And I think that that affected my final star rating, which may not be fair. This book was a great conclusion to an amazing trilogy. And I did end up rating it 4 stars, but I think if I would have read it quicker and I would not have taken so many breaks, it would have been a 5-star. A lot of the stuff at the end was a little confusing to me, and I think that it's because I forgot about some stuff that happened at the beginning. So again, my fault. One thing that did aggravate me is a character that I really, really liked saved the day, but because of some events that I can't talk about, she never got that recognition, and that just didn't sit well with me. Overall, this series is a 5-star even on a reread. And if you're curious about this series, from the outside, it looks like your run-of-the-mill fantasy with a long-lost queen that returns to her kingdom. There are some enemies, there's a little bit of romance sprinkled in, but because of things that I cannot divulge, it is far from what you think it is at the beginning. And that's my favorite thing about this series, and it's also the #1 reason why I like to recommend it. I did listen to book 5 in the Mortal Instruments series, The City of Lost Souls, and I listened to this one on audio. I rated it 3 stars. I think at this point, I'm sort of over the characters in this series. I'm a little tired of them. I feel like the same thing is happening over and over and over again. I have 1 book left in this series, but I've been told that I should wait and read The Infernal Devices before I read The City of Heavenly Light. I think that's what it's called. For a YA novel, I think this is a great series. There is no spice, but at this point, the sexual tension is pretty thick. Book 5 in particular did move the story forward more than the previous book did. And I am looking forward to finishing all of Cassandra Clare's backlist, which will take me a while, but I will continue it into 2025. But it is not a priority read for me. Moving on is a book that I read to my class of middle schoolers. It's called Simon Sort of Says by Aaron Bowe. The story is about a boy who survives a very traumatic event. And because of that, him and his family move to a new town. And in this new town, it is known as the National Quiet Zone. There's no internet, no cell phones, no streaming, no anything. Because the biggest thing that happens in this town is that scientists are trying to communicate with aliens. So they have completely eliminated, even microwaves are banned in this town. Anything that can create interference with this communication with aliens. And our main character, Simon, just loves this because there's no internet. So nobody will be able to Google him and find out what his traumatic event is. Now, if you read the inside cover of this book, it tells you right off the bat what his trauma is. And in my opinion, that made the book much less interesting. There are bits and pieces of details that are sprinkled throughout the book up until the big reveal of his trauma. And I think that it would have been a lot more interesting to read if we didn't know what he had gone through. First off, this book is very hilarious. My class found parts of this very funny, to the point where they couldn't stop laughing and I had to stop reading. But I also don't think that this book is best read as a read aloud. There are a lot of terms that I had to stop and explain to my class. Our main character's dad works in a Catholic church. And so I had to stop and explain a lot of the things that it was talking about in the Catholic tradition, because most of my children don't go to church. I think it's probably very common that children that read this book on their own, children that are the age that this book is geared toward, I think they'll put it down before they finish the book. My class definitely would not have known what was going on if I didn't stop and explain something almost every chapter. If you are going to read this aloud, I would read ahead a little bit because there were some things that I had to eliminate. Specifically, the topic that came up multiple times about the shape of duck penises. I rated this book a 3 star. And that's what my November looked like. If you made it this far, leave me a turkey emoji in the comments. And as always, I appreciate your likes, your comments, your subscribes. If you like my content, that is the best way that you can support me. And until next video, happy reading.